Hello, welcome back to the channel. Absolutely delighted to have you here again. Now, I am blown away by the response that I have had for you guys sending in your images for me to feature here on the channel. And that's exactly what I'm going to do again today. So it's been a while in between the last few episodes, and I want to sort of compress those a little bit because, to be honest, I've got so many of your images I want to show. So today, I'm going to select a number of those and I'm going to put those into categories, and I'm going to probably in the next few weeks try to show you one of these episodes per week. So looking forward to them. Anyway, let's get straight into it, and I'm going to show some of your images again today. So our first image today is from Randy Willis from Arizona in the United States, and I love this image. Now from Randy here, he says, I'm new to Milky Way photography, but when I found your videos, I was anxious to give it a try. Here's a photo of a location in Arizona called The Boulders, quite appropriately. He says he's hiked to this location many times this year, but never been able to get a Milky Way shot. Unfortunately, the monsoon season kicked off a little early, but I managed to get this one. You can see the Milky Way through the clouds, which are lit up by a town in the distance. And you know what, Randy? I actually love this type of moody cloud photograph. So the fact that there's some clouds in the shot, to me, doesn't detract at all from this image. And you've done a really good job of lighting those rocks and those bushes and the cactus and everything else in the foreground to make it stand out from the background sky. So Randy's used a Nikon D7500. That's a crop sensor camera with a Nikkor 16 to 80 zoomed all the way out to 16 millimeters. So he shot one exposure for the sky at ISO 3200 at f2.8 and 6 light painted exposures for the foreground at ISO 500 at f5.6. So he's used my classic fine art light painting method, and I think this is awesome. This really encapsulates the type of photography that I like to shoot. Randy goes on to say this is close to home, so he will be back to get a clear shot of the Milky Way. And they have plenty of clear skies after the monsoon season. So I'm going to look forward to seeing what you come up with, Randy. Now moving on to Brazil. And this is from Rafael Colo. Sorry, Rafael, I hope I pronounced that correctly. But what an absolutely gorgeous image this is. This is the Atacama Desert. And Rafael says it's absolutely incredible at night at this place. And he was on an expedition. This is about 4,000 meters elevation, temperature minus 12 degrees Celsius. They've got a 360 degree of clear sky during the whole night without any clouds. And the sky starts with a blue tone, and as time passes, it changes to a stunning air glow with green and yellow tones over the most beautiful mountains. Well, this is gorgeous. So this is a 2-minute panorama. Let me see, 10 by 15 by 12. I'm trying to work out what that means. I'm not 100% sure exactly what that means, but anyway, that doesn't matter. I'm not sure how many rows, but it doesn't matter. This is absolutely beautiful. Now, the other thing is, Raphael's not telling me in this particular shot what camera or lens he used, but he's sent me through some more images. So let's just have a quick look at those. Once again, this is a panorama. This is the El Tatio volcano observed from the Ruta 245. I'm not sure exactly where that is, but it's in the Atacama Desert. It was again about minus 12 degrees. There's a small bit of moonlight setting in the west, which illuminated the terrain for this shot. Absolutely gorgeous. That is spectacular, Raphael. I absolutely love this one. All right, so here's another one. Now, this is also a panorama. I'm guessing this is a multi-row pano, but Raphael hasn't told me what gear he's used or what lens is used. But nevertheless, have a look at this. Now, this is in Chile. More volcanoes in the background there, and again very, very cold temperatures. So as Raphael says here, it's incredible that we can observe the color of the Roafuki cloud complex reflected in the water. And yeah, this is beautiful. It goes to show just how much more an image is made to look far better when you add water, and there's a reflection there. It doesn't have to be a lot of water, as you can see from this. It's not a big body of water, but he's got that gorgeous green air glow. He's got the large and small Magellanic clouds there low on the right-hand horizon, and Just the landscape, a little, looks like there's possibly a touch of moonlight in this. It's a bit hard to tell, but it is a beautiful image. Okay, so moving on. Now this one has a little bit more information, so that's good. For these shots, there's two more here. He's shooting with a Canon EOS RP, looks like with an Astro mod, and a 35mm f1.8 Sigma lens. And you can see that gorgeous green air glow. Again, it's very, very cold temperatures. He says it's winter, but the winter there is about minus 20 degrees Celsius. Man, oh man, that is cold. This is in Brazil. The second shot here, oh, this is beautiful. Have a look. This is another panorama. Early, and the sun has just set when he took this panorama. And still observing a little bit of the remnants of the setting sun. Once again, some green air glow. A little bit of cloud cover there, but the foreground, lovely, lovely work. These are magnificent. Okay, so now we head over to the United States, and this is John Mckenzie shooting in California. Now, John is using a Canon R5 with a 16-35 lens. I assume that's a Canon 16-35 f2.8 lens. And this first image here of the gorgeous old truck in a paddock with the sky, he's telling me here for this particular one, he's been inspired, but he was struggling with a lot of light pollution from a nearby town. And so he used a sky replacement of a shot that he took himself earlier on in Photoshop. And he's done a pretty good job. I think that looks quite lovely. I love these beautiful old cars and trucks and things like that you find in the middle of nowhere in the foreground. And the second two images, have a look at this windmill. You know, I love a good windmill shot, and I think that John's done a really good job of light painting the foreground here. And you can see the Milky Way stretching across in the sky, low down over those trees. Absolutely magnificent. And this final shot of this tanker. Oh, what a beautiful image this is. And once again, we've got the Milky Way nice and low down behind it on the horizon. And you can see that windmill in the background. I think that's a nice touch that John has actually lit the windmill way off in the distance in the background, as well as light painting the truck in the foreground. And he's done a really good job. This looks right up my alley. I love these old machines and the old trucks and the old cars out in the bush. And yep, really good job here, John. And we're still in the United States. Two images here from Steve Stav. I'm an amateur photographer residing in Western Montana and have been shooting nightscapes for about 5 years now, and he specializes in panoramas. And this first one we're looking at now is a panorama. This is a 9 exposure panorama shot in portrait mode with a Canon 6D and the Rokinon 14mm f2.8 lens. So this is in Western Montana. And I love how Steve has placed the tree dead center in the shot with that light pollution directly behind it. Because what that effectively does is give it that lovely, gorgeous silhouette. And so the light pollution becomes a feature in the image rather than something that is really annoying. And also the water reflection, it does the same thing. It actually adds to the image. And I love the way that the bright star there is also reflected in the water in the foreground. And other than that, the silhouetted trees actually work really well in this image. So the next one, this is a single exposure, and this is taken with a Nikon D850 with a Rokinon 24mm lens. That's interesting. Steve's using a Canon and a Nikon system. Trees in the foreground. You got the night sky there. We've got, it looks like a comet in the sky. If so, that is magnificent. And there's enough lighting in that foreground to be able to discern the foreground features. And that's one of the things that I love, because it's okay to use silhouettes. Like the previous image worked perfectly, but in this one, I think if that foreground was left completely dark, it just would not have the same dynamics that it has here. So I reckon these images, good contrast and really well done, Steve. Love them. Our next image comes all the way from the United Kingdom, and this is from Paul Byers. And Paul has sent through this image captured at Dunstanburgh Castle, or Castle, depending on which school you went to, on the Northumberland coast in the UK. He says, I spent the night on the coast and the whole night was perfectly clear. And that's a rarity in those parts of the world. I set everything up waiting for the Milky Way core to rise. He captured the foreground at f4, ISO 500, 3-minute shutter speed. And the sky was shot at f4, ISO 640, and he shot 5 1-minute tracked exposures. So this is very well put together, Paul. And he used a Nikon Z6, which is a stock Nikon Z6, a Tamron 35mm f 1.4 lens, and the Skywatcher Star Adventurer Mark II. Love those boulders in the foreground. I have seen this image shot in the daytime, but I don't know if I've ever seen one at night. It's got a very, very strong blue tones, but I do like the fact that there's some of that rich yellow gold in the Milky Way galactic core. And at 35mm, one of my favorite focal lengths, I think this one works really well, especially with the castle itself on the hillside directly in the center of the shot. I think this composition works really well. Our next image comes from Antonio Calado from Lisbon in Portugal. And Antonio says, I love your videos because I love the night and the stars in the sky. The photo I'm sharing with you is the first time I've tried to do some light painting that inspired me. I think I didn't focus on the stars very well, but nevertheless, well, it's a bit hard to tell. It's got that dreamy feel about it, and I think that's because he's used some sort of filter or whatever. It doesn't say here, but I love the fact that he's got out there and he's having a go at this genre of photography, and it's very dynamic. I love the castle. Now, what is it? I'm not very good on my pronunciation. Atalaia Magra Castle in Portugal. This is shot with a Nikon D5300. That's a crop sensor Nikon camera with a Sigma 17-70 f2.8 to f4 lens. He shot 10 photos of the sky stars stacked in sequator. He shot 3 foreground images of the light painted foreground at ISO 800 at f2.8, each at 30 seconds. And he's used Sequator, Lightroom, and Photoshop to put all of this together. So I think that's a pretty good effort, considering this is the first time he's tried light painting. So really, really nice, Antonio. Now we travel right across to Mexico, and this is from Mario. So Mario says, hi Richard, this image is a blend. It's the Leonard Comet as seen on the southern Mexico border in December 2021 with an amazing long tail. The sky is shot with a Canon 50mm f1.8, the nifty 50 Canon lens, tracked at 15 minutes, 30 seconds each exposure. So he hasn't told me how many he took, but he shot over a 15-minute time frame. And these were all stacked. And he used an Ioptron Star Tracker Pro with a Canon 80D camera. Okay, so on a Canon 80D, a 50mm lens would be around about 75mm focal length, thereabouts. The foreground is one single exposure at ISO 500, 4 minutes shutter speed at 18mm focal length with an 18 to 135mm zoom lens. And as Mario has mentioned at the beginning, this is a blended image. So he's used a different focal length for the foreground to the sky image. But look at that long tail, Comet Leonard. Wow, I don't think I got one as good as this, Mario. So really, really nicely done, my friend. Our next image is from Ryan Anderson. Now, it doesn't actually say where Ryan is located, but I have a feeling this is in the United States, but correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, Ryan says here, Richard, your channel has been a huge inspiration for my nighttime photography. I've learned so much about technique and post-processing. It's been a huge help in getting me started. I did my first nightscape photography last year, and it was a lot of trial and error. Well, that's pretty typical, and we all do that, Ryan. This year, I've gotten out a lot more and I feel like things are coming together. Please keep up the great work, etc. He says, my next step is looking to invest in a tracker. I would like to see more on using a tracker and how to blend those layers into a final image. Well, Ryan, I've done quite a few videos on that, one not long ago. So I do have a bit of a library already about that. But anyway, the attached image is my favorite so far. 10 images at ISO 5000 f2.8 at 15 seconds shutter speed. That's for the sky, and one image for the foreground at 2-minute shutter speed at ISO 640. Look at that air glow. That looks really, really nice. So Ryan, I'll tell you what, your hard work is paying off because I like the way you've composed this image. You've got the Milky Way coming directly out of the mountain and you've captured that air glow, colors in the sky. You've got some definition in that mountain foreground. Yep, I think this is fantastic. Good work, Ryan. So finally we make our way to Tasmania in Australia, one of my favourite places to shoot the Milky Way. And this is from Corey Lovett. So Corey sent me through a few images. I just want to read a little bit of what Corey has mentioned. So the first image we're looking at here is a sky only. He scouted several locations and found an old barn on a private property right next to the road. So after several phone calls and some investigative work, he was able to contact the landowner and get permission to access the property, which is fantastic. So he says here, he's just starting out on his nightscape photography journey and only have a limited selection of lenses to choose from. So he's using a Canon RP, and with that is a 50mm f1.8 lens, and he used that to create a 6-frame panorama of the sky at this stage with no landscape in the frame. So that's what we're looking at now. Each frame consisted of 20 light frames and 10 dark frames, all at f2.8 at ISO 3200 at 8-second exposure. He then used Starry Landscape Stacker to stack these images for noise reduction and stitched them all together in Lightroom and edited in Photoshop. Now he also used Gradient Exterminator and Star Exterminator during the editing process. These are plugins to Photoshop that you can use to work on your images, and I use a couple of those myself. He then used his Canon RF 24-105 f4 lens and used a combination of low-level lighting and handheld light painting techniques to light the foreground shots. And as you can see here, these frames were shot at f6.3, ISO 800 and approximately 15-second exposures. He says he did have a little bit of trouble with the camera moving between shots, and that is definitely something that you have to be mindful of because it makes the post-processing later on very difficult. So he used a transform tool in Photoshop to line everything back up to an acceptable level. As this is only the beginning of my nightscape photography journey, I wanted to experiment and learn while also enjoying the experience. So I decided to try and take a Milky Way sky using the 24-105 f4 while I was out there, just to see for myself how it would turn out. And I decided to stack once again for noise reduction, and I was happy with the result. Now this looks really, really good. So this is stacked. These were 15-second shutter speeds, ISO 6400 at f4. And again, he took 20 light frames and 10 dark frames and stacked in Starry Landscape Stacker, edited in Lightroom and Photoshop. So what he's got here is a shot of the sky, a shot of a stacked foreground light painted with the original sky, and then he's blended a light painted shot of the building with his 50mm shot of the sky. So 3 images there. And I think it's good because what's happened here is that Corey has taken us through his thought processes, and I like that because what he's doing is trying things while he's out there in the field. He's experimenting a little bit, but at the same time he also has a plan for what he wants to achieve out there. And I would recommend that's the way that we should always approach our nightscape photography. So now we're traveling all the way over to Western Australia, and this is Carl Reed. Oh, this is a beautiful image of St. Saviour's Church in Katrine, built by convicts from nearby Newcastle, which is nowadays called Tudray, one of the oldest churches in Western Australia. So much history and well worth a visit. And he goes on to say that he learned the hard way this evening that when the dew point is 1 degree off, get the dew heater on. Well, I've struck that many times, and it doesn't even have to be 1 degree off. But this was a very cold and damp evening. He had a great night out under the stars at 2 locations not far from one another, this being the second location. So his lens was all fogged up previous to this, so he must have got his lens warmer on, and away he went. He set the camera up in landscape orientation with the idea of creating a 4-image 2-row panorama. He got as low as he could with his bad knees and used a 50% overlap to create this 4x5 image. He used a Nikon Z6 II in landscape orientation. He used the Nikon 20mm f1.8s lens. Shot this at f2.8, 13-second shutter speeds at ISO 3200. He stitched it in Microsoft Ice and processed the whole lot in Capture One software. I love this, and I love the lighting. He used a small rig LM75 light perched in the crook of a branch of a tree about 15 meters away, set to 1%. And he says here he gets into the habit of taking a white towel with him, as I do also, because even at 1% the light is sometimes too bright, but it's nice and rugged, and the temperature controls for hue and saturation, etc., come in really handy. This is fantastic. I love the way that that light is just coming from one side. So he's giving it a nice side light, which gives more texture to the actual image itself. If you look at the brickwork on the church and those stairs, you can see the light and shadow falling off. And to me, that's the essence of a great image. Now, the Milky Way galactic core, when he took this shot, is virtually standing vertical. So it must have been taken in the middle of the year, I would say. And as Carl has mentioned, I love the color temperature he's put onto that foreground. It looks fantastic. Really nice job, Carl. Now, I just had to include this one final image. This is from Patrick Wynne in South Australia. And this is Lake Bonnie, a very famous lake. And people flock to this place to shoot images during the daytime or during the nighttime. And this is absolutely awesome. So, as Patrick has mentioned here, he's so pleased with this photo. He took this photo of the Milky Way over the lake, and it's taken a few years to get this right. He used a Canon EOS R, 15-second shutter speeds at ISO 5000 at f2.8, and the lens used was a Tamron 17 to 35 millimeter lens. It doesn't say what focal length, but I'm guessing it might have been at 17 millimeter. So he took 10 portrait shots to create this pano. Fantastic. There's no stacking or nothing else. Each photo is a single shot. So Patrick, this looks beautiful. You must have done a little bit of lighting on that foreground. I can see just a slight bit of definition there on the lower right hand side, but I love the color. And once again, we've got those central trees and the trees on the left, which are accented by that light pollution that's off in the distance. Because as you know, you can't hide the light pollution. It is there. So my advice is to embrace it and make use of it. And I think Patrick's done that really well here by placing his composition so that those trees in the center are actually silhouetted and actually highlighted. See, our eye is drawn into that light source. And then of course he's got that magnificent Milky Way arch going right across from left to right of the image. And that's one of the things we're blessed with here in Australia. From about this time of the year onwards, August, September, October, it looks like this, and it is absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Patrick. Love your image. Now, you know, it's really my desire to encourage you guys to get out there under the night sky and landscape shooting nightscape images. And so this series is designed to do just that. And I'll be really interested to read your comments down below. So keep the images coming in. I want to see as many as I can, and I'll extend these series as far as I can into the future. Yeah, look, I just want to highlight as many as I can. So you guys have a fantastic week. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.